There's a moment in every person's financial journey when everything changes. One day you're checking your investment account and feeling like you're barely making progress. And then suddenly you wake up and your money is making more money than some people earn at their actual jobs. It's not magic, it's mathematics. And there are 3 specific net worth milestones where this transformation happens so dramatically that your wealth building shifts into overdrive. Before we dive into these 3 game-changing tipping points, let me ask you something. When you think about building wealth, what comes to mind? Maybe you picture some guy in a suit making complicated trades, or someone who inherited a trust fund from their great aunt Gertrude. But here's what might surprise you. The people who actually build substantial wealth aren't necessarily the ones making the most money or taking the biggest risks. They're the ones who understand something that sounds almost too simple to be true. Your net worth doesn't grow in a straight line. It grows like a snowball rolling down mountains, starting slow, then accelerating until it becomes an unstoppable force. And there are 3 specific points on that mountain where the snowball picks up so much momentum that everything changes. These aren't random numbers I pulled out of thin air. These are mathematically proven thresholds where compound interest stops being theoretical and starts being life-changing. The first tipping point happens at $100,000. The second occurs around $650,000. And the third milestone that completely transforms your relationship with money hits at $1 million. Before we continue, hit that like button and subscribe if you're tired of watching your savings grow at the speed of continental drift. Here's what's fascinating about these numbers. Most people think reaching $100,000 means you're 10% of the way to becoming a millionaire. They're completely wrong. And this misunderstanding is exactly why so many people give up before they ever see the real magic happen. Let me paint you a picture of what most people think wealth building looks like. They imagine it's this perfectly predictable process where every dollar you save gets you exactly $1 closer to your goal. Save 10,000, you're 10,000 closer. Save 50,000, you're 50,000 closer. It makes perfect sense, right? Except it's completely backwards from how money actually works when you invest it properly. The reality is far more encouraging than most people realize, but it requires patience that our instant gratification culture doesn't exactly celebrate. We live in a world where you can get food delivered in 30 minutes, stream any movie ever made in 3 seconds, and buy practically anything with 1 click. The idea of waiting decades for anything sounds absolutely barbaric to most people. But here's the thing that separates people who build wealth from people who spend their entire lives wondering why they can't get ahead financially. Money doesn't just sit there doing nothing when you invest it correctly. It starts working for you, earning returns. And then those returns start earning their own returns. This isn't some get-rich-quick scheme or financial fairy tale. This is basic mathematics that has been creating millionaires for generations. Let me show you exactly how this works with some real numbers that might surprise you. Imagine you decide to invest $500 every month. That's roughly $125 per week, which isn't chump change, but it's not exactly an impossible amount for most working adults either. We're talking about the cost of eating out a few times, or maybe what you might spend on subscriptions, coffee runs, and impulse purchases throughout the month. Now, assuming your investments earn an average return of 7% annually, which is actually quite conservative compared to historical stock market performance. Here's where things get interesting. It takes approximately 7 years and 9 months of consistent monthly contributions to reach your first $100,000. 7 years and 9 months might sound like forever, especially when you're just starting out. But think about it this way. 7 years ago, were you the same person you are today? Time has a funny way of passing whether you're building wealth or not. During those first 7 to 8 years, most of the money accumulating in your account comes directly from your own contributions. You're essentially doing the heavy lifting while compound interest is still warming up on the bench. Out of that 100,000, roughly 46,000 comes from your monthly contributions, while the remaining 54,000 represents the returns your money has generated. Not bad for money that's just sitting there working for you, but admittedly, it's not going to change your life overnight. Here's where most people make a critical mistake. They look at those numbers and think the process is too slow, or they get discouraged because the returns don't seem impressive enough. What they don't realize is that they've just completed the hardest part of the entire journey. They've built the foundation that will support everything that comes next. It's like spending years learning to play an instrument. The beginning is frustrating and progress feels painfully slow. But once you reach a certain level of competency, improvement accelerates dramatically. Remember, we're trying to get to 1 million, and you've just hit 100,000. In traditional thinking, you'd assume you're 1/10 of the way there. But compound interest doesn't work that way. The truth is far more encouraging than that. From this point forward, your money starts working much harder for you. Those investment returns that seem modest during the first 8 years begin to snowball in ways that will genuinely surprise you. The next milestone is $200,000. And here's the kicker that blows most people's minds. It only takes about 5 more years to get there. Let me repeat that because it's important. It took nearly 8 years to go from 0 to 100,000, but only 5 additional years to double that amount. We're now 13 years into your investment journey, and you're sitting at 200,000. The mathematics is starting to shift in your favor in a big way. At this point, compound interest is really beginning to flex its muscles. Of that 200,000, you've personally contributed roughly 78,000 through your monthly investments. The other 122,000? That's pure investment growth. Your money has been quietly working in the background, earning returns on returns, and suddenly those gains are becoming substantial. This is where that original claim about the first 100,000 being the hardest starts to make perfect sense. The reason this works is that compound interest is exponential, not linear. Each dollar of growth generates its own future growth, creating this snowball effect that accelerates over time. It's like pushing a boulder up a hill. The beginning is brutal and exhausting, but once you reach the top and that boulder starts rolling downhill, momentum takes over and you basically just have to stay out of the way. Now, you might be wondering what happens during the next stretch toward that magical 7-figure milestone. This is where things get really exciting and honestly a little bit addictive to watch. During the next phase, as you continue making those same monthly contributions, compound interest becomes the dominant force in your wealth building equation. By the time you hit the 18-year mark, you've reached $400,000. Your personal contributions total about $108,000, but your account balance shows $400,000. That means nearly 3/4 of your wealth came from compound growth rather than your own savings. Think about what this means in practical terms. You're now earning roughly $28,000 per year just from investment returns. Remember how long it took you to accumulate your first 100,000? Now you're generating more than 1/4 of that amount annually without lifting a finger. The beautiful part about this whole process is that it doesn't require you to live like a hermit or make dramatic sacrifices to your lifestyle. We're talking about setting aside $500 per month, which for many people represents nothing more than being slightly more conscious about discretionary spending. This isn't about depriving yourself of everything enjoyable in life. It's about making small, consistent choices that compound over time into something truly remarkable. The person who understands this principle and acts on it will build substantial wealth. The person who keeps waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect amount will likely spend their entire life wondering what could have been. And frankly, that's kind of tragic, because we're literally talking about basic math here, not rocket science or insider trading. By year 22, you're looking at $600,000. And this brings us to our second major tipping point. This is where things get really interesting. From a lifestyle perspective, because $650,000 in productive assets represents something that most people never truly understand until they experience it firsthand. Here's why this milestone is so significant. The median household in the United States earns about $78,000 per year. That's achieved by someone having to sell their time to an employer in exchange for a paycheck, dealing with commutes, office politics, demanding bosses, and all the other joys of corporate life. But with $650,000 invested properly, it only takes an 8% rate of return to generate substantial passive income. Let me break this down for you, because the implications are staggering. If you have $650,000 earning 8% annually, that generates $52,000 in investment income. Now, that's not quite matching the current median household income, but it's substantial passive income that can dramatically change your financial situation. And if you're targeting the full median income replacement, you'd need closer to $975,000 at an 8% return to generate that $78,000 annually. For the average household, reaching $650,000 in investments represents a major psychological breakthrough, because suddenly they realize they're generating significant passive income that can supplement or partially replace their work income. They could still go to work if they wanted to, use their salary to accelerate their wealth building even further, and watch their net worth continue growing through compound interest. It's like having your cake and eating it too, except the cake keeps getting bigger even while you're eating it. This is the point where most people start to breathe a little easier financially. The fear of financial ruin doesn't vanish completely, but it shrinks dramatically when you realize you can generate $40,000 to $50,000 per year in passive income. Suddenly, losing a job becomes an inconvenience rather than a catastrophe. Getting sick doesn't mean financial devastation. You have options that simply don't exist for people living paycheck to paycheck. But there's something else that happens at this level that's even more important than the financial security. Your entire relationship with risk changes when you have substantial assets working for you. You can afford to take calculated risks that could accelerate your wealth building even further. Maybe you've always wanted to start a business, but were too afraid to give up your steady paycheck. When your investments are covering a significant portion of your basic expenses, you can afford to take that entrepreneurial leap. Perhaps you want to go back to school or learn a new skill that could boost your earning potential. When you're not worried about paying rent, you can invest in yourself without the crushing pressure of immediate returns. Or maybe you just want to travel and see the world while you're still young enough to enjoy it. When your money is working for you, You're not postponing your dreams until some mythical retirement age when you might be too old or too sick to actually live them. This is what real wealth looks like, and it has nothing to do with showing off or impressing other people. It's about having choices. It's about being able to say no to things that don't serve you and yes to things that do. It's about designing your life according to your values rather than your bank account balance. Now, some of you are probably thinking about inflation and wondering whether these numbers will hold up over time. It's a fair question, and it's actually built into the strategy if you execute it correctly. If you're generating 8 to 9% returns annually and only living off 6 to 7% of your portfolio's value each year, the remaining growth helps your investments keep pace with inflation. Your principal amount gradually increases, which means your passive income gradually increases too. You're not just maintaining your purchasing power, you're actually growing it over time. But let me tell you what happens when you finally cross that magical 7-figure threshold, because this is where things get genuinely mind-bending. Your first $1 million doesn't just represent a number on a screen. It represents a complete psychological transformation that most people can't fully understand until they experience it firsthand. When you hit that $1 million milestone, which happens around year 29 of consistent investing at $500 per month with 7% returns, something shifts in your brain. You'll feel that overwhelming sense of relief first and foremost, thinking, finally, all those years of brown bagging lunches and driving used cars have actually amounted to something tangible. It's like crossing the finish line of a marathon where the prize isn't just a medal, it's the ability to breathe a little easier for the rest of your life. You won't necessarily feel rich, especially with inflation, making $1 million feel more like what $500,000 used to represent. But you will feel validated. You'll realize that building wealth isn't just for trust fund babies or people who got lucky with cryptocurrency. As a regular employee with a regular salary, you've proven that the system actually works if you have the discipline to stick with it. Here's what's fascinating about reaching this milestone. Your first million gives you a massive psychological unlock. If most of it is invested properly, you suddenly start seeing possibilities everywhere. Maybe you've always wanted to angel invest in startup companies but never had the capital. Now you do. Perhaps you've dreamed of buying rental properties but couldn't qualify for the loans. Now your net worth opens doors that were previously locked. The fear of financial catastrophe doesn't disappear entirely, but it shrinks to manageable levels. You can generate $40,000 to $50,000 per year in passive income at today's interest rates, which means even if everything else goes wrong, you're not going to end up eating cat food in your golden years. That's genuinely liberating in ways that people who haven't experienced it simply cannot comprehend. But here's where this gets really interesting, and it's something that separates people who stay millionaires from people who become multimillionaires. Some folks get comfortable after hitting 7 figures and basically coast from there. They've achieved what they thought was impossible, so they ease up on the discipline that got them there in the first place. Big mistake. The people who understand wealth building at a deeper level realize that reaching your first million is like graduating from college. It's a huge accomplishment, but it's also just the beginning of what becomes possible. From this point forward, the mathematics become absolutely ridiculous in your favor. You only need your portfolio to grow by 50% to hit 1.5 million. That can happen in just a few years with proper market conditions. To reach 2 million, you only need your investments to double, which historically happens every 7 to 10 years, depending on market performance. The jump from 2 million to 3 million only requires a 50% increase. From 3 to 4 million, you need just a 33% boost. Each subsequent million becomes easier and easier if you maintain the financial discipline that got you there in the first place. This is where wealthy people start thinking differently about money and time. They understand that every dollar has a potential to become multiple dollars through compound growth, and this understanding influences every financial decision they make. That expensive dinner isn't just costing them $200 tonight. It's potentially costing them several hundred in lost investment growth over the coming decades. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This all sounds great in theory, but what about market crashes? What if the economy tanks right when I need the money most? These are legitimate concerns, and they're exactly why diversification and conservative withdrawal rates matter so much. Here's the thing about market downturns that most people don't realize. If you're consistently investing over decades, market crashes actually help you build wealth faster. When prices drop, your monthly contributions buy more shares, and when the market inevitably recovers, and it always has historically, those extra shares you picked up during the downturn become incredibly valuable. This is why time horizon matters so much. If you're going to need all your money in 2 years, investing in the stock market is risky. But if you're building wealth over 29 years, like in our example, market volatility becomes your friend rather than your enemy. You're essentially buying investments on sale during downturns and selling them at premium prices during recoveries. So, there you have it. 3 tipping points that transform your net worth from a slow crawl to an unstoppable force. $100,000 when compound interest finally wakes up and starts pulling its weight. $650,000 when your money can generate substantial passive income that changes your financial security. And $1 million when you realize you've basically won the financial game that most people don't even know they're playing. The math doesn't lie, even if it requires more patience than our microwave society typically appreciates. Start investing consistently today, because 29 years from now, you'll either be thanking yourself or wondering what could have been. Think about this. In our example, you contributed only $174,000 of your own money over 29 years. The other $826,000, that's compound interest doing the heavy lifting for you. That's your money working harder than you ever could at a job. The question isn't whether this works. The math proves it does. The question is whether you have the discipline to stick with it long enough to see the magic happen. Which tipping point are you closest to right now? Drop 100K, 650K, or 1 million in the comments. And if you're just starting, comment starting today, because that's the most important milestone of all the decision to begin. If this breakdown helped you understand how wealth building actually works, smash that like button and subscribe for more mathematical breakdowns of financial success. Remember, the best time to start was 29 years ago. The second best time is today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.